Hello. This is Derek from One Over Tea. Welcome back to another episode of Tea Soup, a podcast all about tea culture, life in modern China, and Chinese tea. I'm your host, Derek Poskin. I've been living in China since 2016, and I've been drinking, buying, and selling Chinese tea for the past decade. So, pop on that kettle, heat up your teaware, and let's get this session started. Alright, so, welcome back. First episode of 2026. We're doing this. It's been a while. It's been almost like, I think the last episode was in October, and then the last episode before that was almost like 8 months ago. So it's been a long time. This year has been incredibly busy for me. 2025 was very busy for me. I'll get into that later. Even this year in 2026, I've already been running around quite a bit. I just got back from Jingmai. Those that know, Jingmai is the porcelain heart of China. This is where all of the kilns, the industrial kilns used to be, the imperial kilns used to be back in the day. And even now, there's a lot of culture here in Jingmai for a lot of kind of transplants, like people from other places in China that really get into pottery. And there's kind of like one mecca you go to if you're really good at pottery in China, and that's Jingmai. Ironically enough, I was just last week, I was in Yixing, right? And Yixing, a lot of people know about Yixing for the teapots. And so that is also a really famous place for teaware. I'm doing this on behalf of Tao Teaware, by the way. So check out Tao Teaware if you're interested in some of these finds. Because One River Tea is kind of exclusively just tea. And then Tao Teaware, much more focused on the teaware stuff. But yeah, I was out in Yixing, and that feels so different from Jingmai. I think I've talked about it in like the Between the Cracks podcast, the video podcast for Tao Teaware with Dart. Yixing feels like it's kind of like a ghost city. It feels like it's like looking back at the past, trying to reclaim something that was lost, where Jingmai is really just thriving right now. And so yeah, it's the third week of January. I've already been to Jingmai, I've been to Yixing, and then with Alex and Xiaoyan, we all went out to Lu'an. This was an interesting place because we've been there before. I think it's like 2023. We went there for the yellow tea in Huoshan, looking for that Huoshan Huangya. We went all the way up to the Jinjishan, met Master Li, who was really experimenting with like yellow teas and stuff. It's kind of come full circle where now we've been at Hubei, that place in Anshi, Mayantai. We did a lease on the land, on the cabin out there for 5 years. This is back in like 2019, and so we just hit the 5-year mark, and so we're done. And so it's like, hopefully our goal there was to set up enough infrastructure that would last and we can move on. And where are we moving on to? It looks like this place in Lu'an, in the Jinjishan, in Anhui, has some really good potential. And so we're talking with them. We went out there like the first week of January to meet with the villagers, meet with like the tea master, and talk about our goals there, what we want, what we'll do for the village, and kind of what we're hoping to get out of it in return for creating this kind of like very true to the socialist nature, the socialist idea of cooperation. And so working with the village, setting up a village collective, putting funds into the village collective, and really just bringing kind of new economic life into a village that is potentially struggling. So very, very exciting stuff going on there. But yeah, as I mentioned, I don't really do this very often, but it has been a long time since the last break, so I do want to kind of touch base and thank you guys for tuning back in because it's been so long. And I get a lot of messages online, emails, and through Instagram and stuff where people are just waiting for the new episodes. So I'm really, really grateful for everyone who's been binging the tea soup and still listening. So in this episode, I do want to talk about back to my spring tea trip in 2025. And the first place I went to in spring was the Jingmai Mountains. And it was my first time getting to this region. It's one of the 6 new famous tea mountains in Pu'er, and it has been on my list of places to go to for some time now. And how it actually fell into my lap, how I actually got out there is quite an interesting story, which I do want to get into. But since this is the very first episode of 2026, I do kind of want to touch base on where I have been, why I haven't been making so many videos, so many tea soup episodes and whatnot. To say I've been busy is kind of an understatement. You know, like in 2025, I got married. I had a wedding, I bought a house, I remodeled the house. Like, it's been a huge amount of work. And it's kind of this like interesting fallacy that I've been wrestling with where it's like, oh, well, last year I was a little too busy to make any new episodes, but this year it's going to be different. And it's kind of this feeling I get where it's like, maybe that's not true. Like, you're always waiting for the moment to happen. You're always waiting for more time. And sometimes it seems like you just get busier and busier. And so there is this like, this fallacy where in terms of there is no true respite. And even like on my birthday, like this year, I wrote a little poem about that where it feels like there is just this eternal pressure. And it's like, it goes like this: time, the grindstone, and life pushes us to edge, softly at first, so as not to frighten the axe. But as times pass and the steel of our soul hardens to the press, the pressure never relents, but increases with intent. Rest is impossible for the honing blade, so make best this transformation. Get drunk amidst the shower of sparks, and cut clear when cold sober. The life of a useful axe is sharp, short thing. And so yeah, like, while E.E. Cummings would roll over in his grave if he heard me explaining a poem, it is that feeling that we just get acclimated to the pressures of life. We get busier and busier, and we grow in our capacity to endure this greater pressure, this greater weight of work, until the carbon within us is compressed into diamonds, right? So yeah, as mentioned, last year was a grind for sure. I mean, so much happens. I did so many once-in-a-lifetime things for me, right? Like, I got married, I bought an old house in the ancient city of Yangzhou, I remodeled that house with my wife. You know, I started up a little tea space for community and for friends. And it's been really rewarding, this grind. And me and my wife, Mia, we got married in June. We took like a few-week honeymoon in Japan, then jumped right into the remodel of the empty cup. That's what we're calling the tea space. And yeah, we're having a full remodeled experience. Like, we had the headaches, the redos, the why is this not here, and why didn't we do that? Why did no one see this? We had arguments with the designer, with the carpenters, with the contractor, the electricians, the painters, and late nights looking at the most minute details of like wood grain and paint textures and the lights. And it's been a lot, but you know, we've done it together, and man, has it tempered the marriage already. So in just a few months, we're already very good at forgiving each other and making arguments and taking care of each other when we're both frustrated and tired and just disagreeable. So highly recommend it. Really, really good way to temper a marriage. And also it's beyond a blessing to like run a tea space with the love of my life. So really, really can't complain about it, but I do need to make more time for all of these other projects. And beyond the tea and the teaware and the sourcing trips and finding excellent teas and teapots and gaiwans and whatnot, of course, is the storytelling behind it, is the Tea Soup podcast. And so let's get back into the episode. Let's talk about Jingmai Mountains. And so the Jingmai Mountains, if you're into pu'er tea, it's always around. It's in the new 6 famous mountains category, which is interesting. I'll get into this a little later because I found out there is a new and an old 6 mountains category, famous 6 mountains category. And I remember one time quizzing Paul, like of Y2T when I was visiting him, what are the 6 mountains? And he started he was like, oh, it's pretty simple. And he like named all the 6, but I think he named like the old ones. And then his wife was like, well, what about this one? And he's like, oh, well, I guess that maybe there are different counts. And so it seems like it's not like it's always been 6 famous mountains. I think it's something that comes around and gets revised. So yeah, Jingmai is part of the new famous 6 mountains. And again, I kind of laugh every time I see these 6 famous mountains or 5 famous national mountains and 6 famous Taoist mountains, 8 famous Buddhist mountains. The Chinese, they love the classification systems like this. Like, just look at there are 6 types of Chinese tea, right? White tea, green tea, yellow tea, oolong tea, black tea, and dark teas. However, where does raw pu'er fit into this, right? It's like a semi-fixed tea that doesn't undergo any fermentation or rapid oxidization. Its counterpart is the cooked pu'er, shu pu'er, which fits perfectly into that dark category, but raw pour is kind of an outlier. And so it's like, even like oolong tea, like if you're looking at that, they do the colors there, right? So the oolong gets lumped into like blue tea, because they're really trying to make it all fit into this like very nifty classification system. And so when I see these 6 famous tea mountains, it's usually something that comes after the fact, like somebody trying to classify something that already exists. And so it's useful, but it's not like the end all be all of understanding pu'er. But real quick, yeah, let's talk about it. So the old 6 are deeply nestled in Xishuangbanna, in the east area of Xishuangbanna, east of the Linsong River, while the new 6 kind of spread out over the pu'er tea-producing regions. So the old 6 are Yiwu, Yola, Gedong, Yibang, Mangzhi, and Manzhuang. Now, if you haven't heard of these, it's probably all right, because these are, as the name implies, not the most famous in modern pu'er production. And so modern pu'er production has shifted over west on the other side of the Linsong. And here you get, the 6 sometimes called the 8 new famous tea mountains of Nanluo, of Hekai, Bulang, Mongsong, Bada, and of course today's mountain Jingmai. And yeah, like this idea of like new famous and old famous, I think it really just refers to their popularity, because a lot of these regions have been producing tea for very, very long. And so to call something like, Jingmai new when it has like the largest cultivated ancient tea garden on the planet is kind of like a misnomer a little bit. And so I think this idea of a new famous and old famous, it's more referring to when these teas became popular. In the 2000s, Yunnan exploded with pu'er popularity, pu'er tea, raw pu'er tea, and a lot of it was concentrated in the east, right? This is where like Yiwu is, and then later all the other famous mountains kind of came to life, right? And Nanluo, which is right along the highway, a very, very, very nice place between like the Jingmai airport and like the deeper Monghai region. And so it's kind of like everyone's kind of first stop when you're getting deep into the tea mountains. And so that's become very famous these days. Now, Jingmai is located just north of Xishuangbanna, still on the very western side, so right on the edge, right by Myanmar. And it's actually located in the region called Pu'er. Now, of course, that sounds pretty silly to say this famous pu'er mountain is located in Pu'er, but if you know, the Pu'er region in Yunnan is the one that was popularizing pu'er tea in ancient times, the Qing dynasty and whatnot. And so the tea itself from this region was just called pu'er by the people in the courts. There's another confusing point where it was renamed. The Pu'er region was renamed during the Maoist era, I believe, to Simao. And so some people still call it Simao and other people call it Pu'er. I think it retained its original name in like the later 2000s and was renamed Pu'er. But that's why sometimes you'll see Simao, sometimes you'll see Pu'er. It's just this kind of little belt that's belt of a region in southern Yunnan, just north of Xishuangbanna, and just below, Linsang. So to recap, looking at the pu'er production in southern Yunnan, from south to north, the regions are thus: Xishuangbanna, deep in the south, bordering Lao and whatnot. Then just north of there, you get Pu'er, which was previously called Simao. Then north of Pu'er, you get Linsang. And then finally, north of Linsang, you get Baoshan. And so while leaving Jingmai, it's actually really close to Xishuangbanna, and we drove through Monghai, as the closest airport is in Jinghong in Xishuangbanna. Now, Jingmai has to be one of the most beautiful tea mountains I visited. And I say this because it's iconic. I saw somebody post a photo of the Nogan village on Instagram, and I was immediately being like, oh, that's Nogan in Jingmai. It's so recognizable for the architecture and just for the general tropical vibe of it, where a lot of the tea mountains I visited, like, you'll get mixed kind of construction. Like people that are building their own houses, their own studios, their own factories up on the mountains with like steel and bricks and, what is that? polycarbonate or fiberglass roofing and stuff. And so here in Jingmai, it's different. The government has taken a huge investment into building the architecture for some of these villages. And in the Jingmai village, we'll get to this later, they were kind of in a lottery or in a queue waiting for the government to give them funds to rebuild their houses. They weren't allowed to build their own stuff, they had to let the government do it. And the reason the government's taken so much of interest in Jingmai is because it was recently named a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2023. And as a result, it's got a lot of government attention, funds, subsidies, investments, and it's becoming like a model travel site in Pu'er. And yeah, like when I visited there, it felt like I was on vacation. It was so cool, so chill. Like it's there's this interesting element of like very isolated, remote kind of region, tropical sense, a lot of like deep culture, but then a lot of other influences coming in, like some Han people from like, bigger cities in China opening up coffee houses there. Other people from other nations coming in, opening up tea houses or like bakeries and stuff like that. And so it's a really interesting mix of that very, very traditional culture in the very traditional architecture with this new age kind of stuff coming in. So yeah, speaking of the cultural mix, initially Chiang Mai had two main ethnic groups. There's the Bulang and the Dai minority group. I think the Dai was one of the first groups of people to settle there, and there's some cool origin stories about the Dai. And that's Dai for the Dai, and Bulang for the Bulang. And they've been living there for over 1,000 years. And Chiang Mai is really cool because, as I mentioned earlier, it has that ancient garden of cultivated trees. This means that the trees were planted and cared for by humans for over like 1,000 years, which is incredible. The amount of tea there is also absurd. It's like 12,000 mu, which is like 1,600 acres of just like pristine Gushu Old Arbor Pu'er tea in a beautiful region. And so that's why Chiang Mai is one of these famous mountains, because there's just so much good tea up there. What is also really amazing about this is it's kind of planted, I say it was cultivated by humans, but it's also planted in that kind of forest tea style. And so there's like a patchwork of gardens throughout the mountain, usually clustered around the villages, but it's a lot of tea trees dispersed with, huge other trees above them, ground cover beneath them, people growing vegetables beside them, even cows grazing underneath the gushu. It was a really cool experience seeing how complex it is up there, just the ecology and the biology up there. Getting down into the facts, the general elevation for the mountain's about 1,500 meters. I think it's like the peak is like 1,600, a little higher than that, and the lower part is like over 1,000. And there are two main village areas: the Jingmai villages in the northern slopes and the Manjing villages on the southern slopes. I believe the Jingmai is more Dai and the Manjing more Bulang. There are a total of 14 traditional villages up there, with the Jingmai villages having 8 and the Manjing region having the remaining 6. And so, as I mentioned, the Jingmai regions traditionally primarily Dai. These villages, the construction of them, and even where they're located on the mountain, this is kind of like the lower elevation, if you will, gentler slopes. They're growing more agriculture. When you get into the back end of the mountain, the Manjing area, where the Bulang have settled, these are steeper slopes, higher elevation, really intense forested areas, a lot more difficult to get to. But yeah, to just name off the villages here, in the Jingmai, this is the Dai villages, primarily Dai villages. You have the Jingmai Dazai, you have Nogan, Bangai, Mengben, Mangeng, Laojiufang, Nanzuo, and Longbang. While in the Manjing area, which is deeper in the mountains, you have the Wengji, Wenghua, the Upper Manjing village, the Lower Manjing village, Manghong, and Nanai. And like I said, like this place is just like, it's tea sourcing on easy mode because all of these villages are so close together and they all have their own tea, their own tasting profile. For me, I had the urge to just explore every single village, and I'm like, okay, I can press some tea from this village, press some tea from this village. And so I did a little bit of a walk around that we'll talk about later. But I think it's important also. I say that it's like all these villages are really close together on the mountain, but I think it is important to kind of question yourself, how big is a mountain? Like when I'm talking about the Jingmai Mountain, are you thinking of just like a singular peak kind of mountain? Because it's a lot larger than you would imagine, I think. It reminds me of the Bara Mountain down south, which I guess is also just a different mountain you might have not heard of or thought about or been to, but it's massive. Like you have different slopes, different areas, higher elevations, and even like getting from one side of the mountain to the other takes a really long time. I remember our buddy in Nogan gave us a ride to Wangji, and this is like from the Dai area to the Bulong area. And it was about a 30 or 40-minute drive. And it was kind of later at night. It was already dark. And we actually picked up a guy who was walking from one area to the other. And Yanxiang was just like, buddy, like, if you're trying to get to Wangji, that's going to be like 3 hours walk through this mountain at night. Like, let me give you a ride. And so he ended up giving that guy a ride as well. And so thinking of the size of this is just one village to the next village on the same mountain, and it's be like a 3-hour hike, right? And so having 14 villages here, 2 different ethnic groups, and a lot of different like cultural diversity, ecology, it really does feel like you could just settle on this mountain for 1,000 years, right? It's got everything you need. Now, as I mentioned, the mountain has different elevations, and the teas in like the Jingmai area, the Dai area, a little lower elevation, Bulong typically higher elevation. There's this kind of like plateau that happens in the mountain, which is like called the Dapingzhang, and this is where one of the oldest ancient tea gardens is located, and you can go visit there. It's kind of like loosely open to the public, and if you walk up there, the roads are kind of like paved. They're really nicely paved, not just like concrete paved, but it's a general beautiful walk, and you get this feeling of this primeval kind of sensation. You have massive trees that grow way over the top of everything. I remember just recording videos and laughing by just like how almost like otherworldly it felt like up there. It felt like I'd stepped back in time to the age of dinosaurs. It was so cool. A lot of farmers will actually go up to this area and buy fresh tea leaves and then use that to either supplement or create their own pressings, their own batches of this Dapingzhang tea. It's a higher elevation, and a lot of farmers say that it is higher quality than a lot of the other teas around. And so if you can find some Dapingzhang, take a good sip on it. Getting back into some facts about the Jingmai Mountain, I read that within the 8 largest villages, there's something like 720 households. And within that, just about 3,000 permanent residents on this mountain. These are Bulang, Dai, some Hani people, some Han people, and more than half of them are actual farmers, and the other half being just various kinds of workers, laborers. I also saw that the average annual income from crops a farmer can be expected to earn is about like $400. This is like US dollars throughout a year from selling your agricultural goods. Now, tea might kind of offset that a little bit, and maybe like vegetable selling is bringing this average number down. But these are the kinds of numbers that we're very keen on observing as One River Tea, because initially when we first started One River Tea, we were really excited about helping farmers overcome their domestic limitations by giving them access to the global economy. And so, yeah, we're always challenging ourselves as we are in this place as middlemen, essentially, in this scheme of buying domestic and selling globally. If we don't, at some point, pass off this fair trade, this profit, this sharing initiative with the farmers, we're kind of exploiting them, right? By following the status quo, we're keeping them stuck in their domestic limitations while we're free-flying in the global world. And so what we really want to do is we want to not exploit the farmers, right? It's a very, very kind of clear thing. And so this is the idea of like, fair trade, but what does fair trade imply? I think the fair trade numbers kind of get wacky a little bit for a tea, and you're kind of looking at the larger companies. If you're looking at a single farmer who has really good Gushu tea, maybe his tea is pretty good, but the market is still affecting him quite a bit. If you were paying attention to what we're doing with the profit sharing initiatives, we worked with Farmer Tan down in Sichuanbana. His teas were just dropping in price incrementally, not incrementally, like by half every year since like 2023. And this year he just kept calling me. He's like, hey, do you want to buy more tea? Do you want to buy more tea? And I'm like, I don't think we need to buy more tea right now, but I could obviously see like he was struggling. And so what we did is we did a profit sharing, a pressing of his autumn cake, and we split the profits with him. And looking at the numbers for his annual income and the money that we were able to kick back to him for buying this tea, we essentially supplemented the annual income, about half of his annual income, in that Black Friday sale with his tea cake. So thank you guys for participating in that. And this is so yeah, these profit sharing initiatives have been part of One River Tea from the genesis. I mean, this is what Alex and I are largely thrilled about. Beyond just having really good tea, we want to help people in different ways, right? I mentioned earlier getting that idea of that socialist idea of true support, community, solidarity with the producers, with the makers, with the consumers, all through, instead of just being these glorified middlemen that are making a profit by exploiting the farmer and selling global. And so we've been doing this for a while, and one of the biggest failures we had was when we were working with Hefeng, and we tried to do a very early profit sharing with them. We got all the villagers on board, we told them our ideas, and we bought a bunch of tea from them. It was like green tea, and it just didn't sell. Like, we ended up selling like 10 of them and had like $200 generated from these sales, and it just doesn't really spread out over 7 households when you hype it up that much. And so it just felt like a pittance. And so what we did is we actually paid them out from our own pockets to kind of give them that extra feeling of solidarity, and hope they will keep working with us in the future. And this failure actually did help kind of reorganize the way we think of the Solidarity Fund, wherein the farmers and the villagers we work with don't receive assistance based on the sale of their own products necessarily. Sometimes they do with like solidarity cakes and stuff, but a lot of times what we're doing is we're generating income through the sale of, Feng Huang Dan Song for Wudong Dan Song, and then we're giving it to somebody out in Hubei to help them with like buying the machinery, buying the equipments they need. And so you're not this further prevents them from being isolated and limited by their own tea, their own location that they can produce, right? Because people want Dansong Oolong, they don't necessarily want some no-name Hefeng tea, right? And so by doing this, we can allocate the funds wherever they need to go. Therefore, this village in Anhui, which we're potentially going to work with, could receive funds we generated from, like white tea. And yeah, speaking of white tea, that is actually the next profit sharing cake that we're doing. That should be actually out very, very soon. Maybe even like when you hear this episode. And this is with Wu. If you listen back to one of those early white tea podcast episodes I did, I think it's like episode 5, ages ago, released like in February of like 2023. This is about the Guangyang village. And Wu is an incredible guy. He has a really cool story about leaving the tea farm in his 20s to like go out to the coal mine in like northern Shanxi and work as a coal miner because there was no money in tea. And then when tea started becoming popular in 2010, he came back to the village and started, making more tea, selling more tea. But he's been hit with the same slump in the economy that Farmer Tan did. Farmer Tan got hit with down in Sichuanbana, where right now just the price of tea is going down and down and down. And now it's like suddenly like, okay, like I could make more money coal mining, right? And so we've been working with him for a long time. He's always been giving us really good prices for his teas, and we want to give him a kickback. And so we got a bunch of his sai cha, which is like the heirloom cultivar, and we're pressing that into cakes and crackers. And yeah, like we're going to split the profits with him. He's totally on board. And I should probably be writing an email explaining this and sending it out because we're going to release this to you very, very soon. Anyways, this is part of one routine. This is why I kind of dove right into how much are they actually making up on the Jingmai Mountain, because a lot of this information is open to the public. You can just find out the records and find out the census, find out like the general mean and income that they're making up there. So very, very interesting to consider that. However, one thing that we should also consider is $400 a year sounds incredibly small in the West, right? But it does go a very long way in a place like the Jingmai Mountain. And so it's really important to kind of put this into an understanding of like, when I was out on that mountain, I didn't see, extreme poverty, right? Everyone seemed pretty well taken care of. And so people working with to give this kickback to, they're not necessarily on the highest of my list because they seem pretty good with the government helping them build their houses, the government helping tourists come out there and paving the roads and stuff like that. It seemed like everyone on Jingmai is doing pretty all right. I mean, maybe I just haven't found the people that really could use this assistance. I mean, one thing you also need to, or I guess I need to be very aware of, is this idea of this white savior complex, right? Like, you don't need to fall into this thing like, oh, they're so poor, I need to help them so much. Like, I'm always self-critiquing. Alex is also self-critiquing, and we critique each other, challenge each other. And we're really trying to do the most we can with the money we're making to help the right people and set up lasting systems that can enact this kind of like socialist change, right? Where everyone benefits from it. So, like I said, getting back to it, the farmers are typically charging a fair price for their teas, fair to what they need to live a life in their region. However, no one's immune to catastrophe like the market slumps or a burnt down house or any outlying circumstance. And so that's where, for the past year now, and continuing on, it's writing it into the bylaws. We're putting 15% of all of our revenue into this kind of social fund. And the social fund can go to any kind of projects that we're interested in, but it needs to go back to the people. And so this is not profit for us. We've even capped our salaries. This is a funny thing. It's kind of spooky, but it's like, I think I talked about it in the last episode. We talked about it in the last episode where our goal is to make enough money to survive and live a decent life and not get greedy with it. And so by capping our salaries, we have more money, more monetary power to reinvest into community, to get more people involved in this cooperative, to get more volunteers out onto the farm and whatnot. Anyways, getting back into the Jingmai Mountain. So, as I mentioned, looking at the different villages, how many people are up there, 3,000 people in these villages, and primarily there are two main ethnic groups, right? There's the Dai and the Bulang. And what's really interesting about this is they're very, very distinct. It's very easy to just step into a village and know immediately if you're in the Dai village or in a Bulang village. The architecture is different, the food is different, the music is different, the rituals are different. And I mean, right off the bat, I would like to say, this is a hot take, I prefer the Dai architecture significantly to the Bulang architecture. Now, in my layman's opinion, like, it's the Dai architecture for their housing. It feels more like I would see what you would see in like Thailand or Laos. It's very airy construction, big solid wood pillars, nice beams, sloping roofs, and just sides of the building that are just open to the elements. Where the Bulang architecture just feels heavier, more wood, walls. So you get a sense of this solid security, as if you're keeping something out. I don't know, it feels very different from the airy Dai style that is immediately recognizable. Now, as is common, I do want to get into some of the legends surrounding the original settlings of this mountain. And so I found both a Bulang and a Dai settling story, and they seem a little similar. People wandering through the mountains, through the wilderness with the tribe, and then finally settling on the mountain. The one I liked a little more, that I got some names for, was the Dai story. So the legends of the Dai story kind of goes like this. And so they speak of a time where the Dai people were hunters and gatherers. They were just a tribe. The tribe was too large, and it was difficult to feed everyone. And so instead of like splitting up the patriarch, Zhao Yula, took the people further and further south, and they crossed the great river, the Linsang River. And it was in this area that they saw many wild elephants. And so they named the river a Million Elephant River. And in the Dai language, that's Lang Jiang Jiang. Jiang is river, and then Lang Jiang later became Lancang, in the Lancang River. And this whole area is kind of called the Lancang River Valley, which is, comes from this million elephants. And so the story continues that one day Zhao Yula saw a beautiful golden deer in the wilderness. And he was a hunter. And so what would he do? He chased the deer. He wanted to catch it. And so he chased it, and it kind of led him on and on. And he chased it for days. It was like when he would get tired and slow down, the deer ahead of him would get tired and slow down. When he would stop and drink water, it would drink water. When he ate food, it would eat berries. And followed it for days until it just suddenly disappeared. And Zhao Yula looked around, found himself in a primeval forest atop a vast mountain overlooking the sea of clouds. The soil was fertile, great for growing crops, and he realized this is an ideal place to settle down. And so that's the story I got for the Dai settlement of the Jingmai Mountain. And it's cool. You see the million elephants, you see the golden deer, some really great symbols for the Jingmai Mountain. Now, traveling to Jingmai was a really excellent experience. Like, beyond just sourcing teas, a trip for finding the teas, the villages themselves, a lot of them felt like they existed outside of time. This is like the old architecture style, the deep entrenched rituals of the cultural identities of these places and these peoples. And so I even named like the cake we pressed from the Nogan village out of this feeling, Illud Tempus. It's means outside of time. It's from Mircea Eliade's book, The Sacred and the Profane. And Illud Tempus kind of refers to this sense of mythic time, of sacred primordial time, where the gods first acted, where the myths and the stories actually lived and the world was created, right? The sacred patterns of this world were first revealed, and through ritual you kind of gain access to that state. You gain access to the primordial beginning of the world through the rituals of, praying to the tree spirit, the old tree, and Yanshang took me up to the Dapingjiang and showed me where the tree was and said every year they come there and they give sacrifices or they give alms and pray homage to this tree spirit, which was the beginning of the Jingmai Mountain. And so even in that village where everything is old architecture, it feels like I'm outside of the profane time, this linear historic time. And I've fallen into a world and a time that has always existed, that is beyond the measurements of the modern world. Another one of these interesting rituals that is common in the Bulang people and the Dai people is their really intense devotion to Buddhism, where it's customary for most youths to chuja. Chuja is like to renounce the world and live in a monastery for like at least 2 weeks. And it depends on the person. I think Yan said that he spent 2 years, gave up the world for 2 years before coming back and getting married and settling down and doing the tea full time. Where my friend Sandan in the Bara Mountains, he was Bulang. And he actually went to Thailand for several years to a monastery and then learned Mandarin and came back and started doing a lot more with his village up there. And so it's really cool seeing these kind of rituals that are still enacted today, this idea of the sacred and the profane and stepping out of the profane world into the sacred world and how everyone has to do it at some point. And this is like, it's really cool, like just seeing all of these living rituals and being there. So again, I was very moved by it. And so the cake for Illud Tempus is the Nogan village, and it really just, for me, is my experience up in the Jingmai Mountains. But actually, yeah, let's get back to reality here and talk about how I got up to the Jingmai Mountains. I hinted that it was an interesting story earlier, and it still kind of blows my mind because really wasn't actually on my list of places to go this year, the Jingmai Mountain. I wanted to go at some point, but I didn't know it would be this year. But the opportunity fell into my lap. It was like that fourth level of luck that I talk about often on this podcast, where it came to me because of my notoriety and because of something I was doing. Now, I might have mentioned earlier, like, I really love making content, the long form content, this podcast. And so thank you for being here. And thank you for listening to this really slow story, this unveiling of interesting ideas that I have, and taking the time, because so much content these days is just like hyper processed, condensed, and just spoon fed to you. And I'm part of that problem, right? Like I fear about making too much short form content and brain rot, because I love making these little videos, the 1 minute videos, filming them, editing them, telling a little story. And I can really dance around that singular topic. I can illustrate it with ideas, and I have so much B-roll, videos and photos and stories. I have so much to tell, and it's so cool to be able to put that into a little minute and show you guys. However, I fear that maybe it's not doing as much good as I would like to believe. Especially because I have been consuming way too much of this information, doom scrolling late at night, refreshing my news feed and stuff like that. And it's like, I've been wondering if it's actually doing any harm, or if it's doing any good at all. I always come back to this mantra that I repeat in my head. It was something I heard in a books album. It was a quote by Einstein talking about his admiration for Gandhi. And he says that we should really emphasize to do things in his spirit, not to use violence in fighting for our cause, but by non-participation in anything you believe is evil. And for me, that really hits, right? Where it's just like, okay, like, am I feeding into this evil system by creating short form content, right? Like, is it benign or malignant? And sure, my content's interesting, genuine, I innocent, I like doing it. However, the system that it's plugged into might have ill intent or consequences. And so the way of generating views, right, capturing the attention of the viewers, I'm consequently generating ad revenue. I'm making it easier for mega corporations to sell products to somebody who's filled with the dopamine my short form video made, right? It's like buttering up the bread for the capitalists. And the mind is the bread, and the infinite scroll is the butter wheel. And, like, this gets into, ironically enough, a conversation I saw on a reel. And it kind of equates the idea of attention as a commodity, as seen through the eyes of, like, the Marxist value of labor. Exploitation often comes from alienation, right? By isolating tasks, a larger conglomerate can simultaneously increase production, increase productivity, and prevent any one part of the puzzle learning the magic process. And so there's no inherent value in just hammering a nail. You can try it yourself. It's not like, Mario, where you hammer the nail, hammer the block, and a coin comes out. The reason carpenters make money is because hammering that nail is part of a larger process. There's a bigger plan involved, right? You need thousands of nails to build a house, to be hammered to build a house. Likewise, there's no inherent value in you watching, a reel, right? For you, it's a simple thing you do. However, the companies that aggregate that information, that are using it for marketing reasons, that are selling the data, that are training AI, they're making money from it. And so is short form content exploiting our conscious attention, right? Is it making us more susceptible to the subtle brainwashing of suggestions? And anyways, this is my concerns all laid out there for, am I part of the problem or not? And there's no real direct answer, right? It is something that I am left pondering. And I would like to say that these long form podcasts, the books, the novels, the Substacks, these are the balm, the medicine, this to our eroding attention span, right? And to, when you read a book, I love paperback books that don't have advertisements in them, right? Like, imagine every third page being an advertisement that you have to watch, you have to read. And yeah, I mean, while a lot of people would be like, oh, our attention span's eroding, we're thinking shorter and smaller. I mean, there's easy ways to reprogram it, right? Meditation, touching grass, boredom. I was bored so much during this trip. I was like too tired to do anything, and I didn't want to just like look at my phone. So I just sat there and I just like counted lights in the ceiling and stuff like that. And so this is choose wisely, right? The long form content or the short form stuff. But creating short form content did create this opportunity for me. It's undeniably effective in the modern world, getting noticed in social media. I mean, to quote the Rubaiyat from Omar Khayyam, a Persian poet, mathematician, astronomer in like 1100s, like really, really awesome. He has a great collection of quatrains, and one of them has this, I think it's quatrain 45. He's talking about, he says like, make game of that which makes as much of thee. And so I've always taken it like, perhaps he's saying like, make mock of the world because it makes a joke of you, but I've always kind of seen it as this idea of like, play the game or the game plays you. And so for me, making the short form content, getting noticed, it created this opportunity for me to get out to the Jingmai Mountains. And so on February last year, I got a private message on my Red Note account where I'd been posting a lot of videos. And they said they've been looking for, a foreigner that knew a lot about tea that would be interested in doing a commercial for a milk tea company. And so this is hilarious because if you know anything about me from the podcast, and I'm also like a true 90s kid at heart, where it's like the idea of selling out just fills me with like cringe and shame. And like, I almost said no right off the bat. We all know like bubble tea in China, like milk tea in China, it's not really high quality teas. And what I'm selling here for Whatever Tea is so different from, bubble tea and milk tea. And it's like, oh, like my reputation it could be at stake there, right? However, my fiance at the time, right, she responded to them to get more details, and it seemed pretty not bad on all things considered, right? They would pay me like $400 for a day of filming. Take me out to that ancient village in Jingmai. They would pay for the plane ticket for me and my fiance, hire a driver to escort us from the airport to the Jingmai filming scene, and then they even agreed to book my return ticket like a week later so that we could just spend a week on the Jingmai Mountain. And so, as it was a place I wanted a tea source anyways, I decided to do it. It was also like a full disclosure, it was chaji bawang milk tea, and I'd actually been drinking them quite a bit. My company was buying us a lot of this chaji tea, and I was like, oh, this actually tastes like tea. Anyways, I'm not trying to sell it or anything. I'm just saying it's not bad. And so that's kind of only the beginning of this funny story, because it was pretty nice. The hard part about it was the fact that, I'm still teaching on the weekends. And so the only way to get this shot done is I had finished class on Sunday night. I took a train to Shanghai, a taxi to the airport, a red-eye flight to Yunnan that landed at 3 a.m., and then I had a driver waiting there to drive us the 3 hours out to the mountain in Jingmai, directly from the airport through the middle of the night. And it was sorry, almost cursed there. It was a terrible trip. It was a nightmare. And like the roads were all windy. I was so tired, nauseous, and I just couldn't sleep the entire time. To go from a full weekend of teaching classes to just immediately staying up all night and then going again, it was a lot. But it's, it costs a lot to have these amazing things, right? And so I'm very grateful for the opportunity. So we arrived in the hostel, like just had enough time to shower and lay down for like a second before we were getting up in the very, very early morning to go see the sunrise over the mountain, over this like a Shengtai garden. Shengtai was a new word for me. I saw it a lot this year. And so I got a sample from some tea from a guy in Bada Mountain. He's like, oh, it's the Shengtai tea. I'm like, what the heck is Shengtai? I looked it up. And Shengtai, the Chinese phrase, just means something like ecological, like greenery. And the way it's used by Chinese tea farmers in Yunnan, it's usually used to express small bushes that are usually terraced and trimmed to like, waist height or lower, very easy to cultivate, very beautifully ordered rows. And so it's about as far away from wild gushu as you can get, but it looks beautiful. And so like the advertising team thought it would be an excellent shot just to describe that fresh, natural taste, get some drone shots of like us walking through the garden and stuff like that. One thing that was actually really cool about this is I found out, I wasn't just a hired talent, I was also kind of their tea consultant. Like, I was very quickly clear that I knew more about tea than everyone on the scene. And so, like, they kept asking me questions, like, when they were filming the process of the tea. It was really cool because they were doing their fact checking through me. Like, they're like, is this the right way? Do people actually carry tea like this? Like, how long does the tea picked here? And then do they immediately wither it? What do they do with the tea here? And I kept telling them, like, this shot doesn't make any sense for making tea. And then they would revise what they were going to shoot to make it actually follow a logical sense of tea production. And so, yeah, it was actually pretty cool. Like, it was my first time with, like, a lot of Chinese people, like, looking to me for, like, the answers about how tea is processed and made. It felt pretty good. Another funny thing is, like I said earlier, I'm definitely not the talent here. And so we got out there, they were doing my makeup, we were waiting for the sun to rise, and I had my camera. I was walking around taking pictures. It was very beautiful. When up rolls, like, this Mercedes-Benz van, and out comes this, like, Chinese Korean pop star with his full retinue of, like, people doing his makeup, people filming him taking photos, his manager, his security, and stuff like that. And right beside them comes, like, traditional, like, farmer, just in his, like, really old beat up, like, a tractor motorbike kind of thing. And it's just such a cool juxtaposition. I take a photo of it and they just lock in on me and they're like, no photos. Delete that photo right now. I'm like, oh, whoa, this guy's a big deal. And it was yeah, so apparently it's got, like, millions of fans. Like, I actually forgot his name. I'm not doing it on purpose. I could probably look it up, but again, the point here is not essentially specifically who it was. The point here is that it was a really wild experience for me to, like, do this commercial with this, like, celebrity essentially who, like, has so many fans that would pay an arm and a leg to be in my shoes, because we're just, like, walking through the garden, making small talk, and he turns out to be a really nice, genuine guy. And, we kind of connected on different things. He wants to, like, practice more English and speaks really incredible Korean. He's from China and stuff like that. And it was really interesting, but I think he enjoyed it too, because, like, I really didn't care he was famous. I just treated him like a regular human being. I treat everyone with a good deal of respect, right? I'm curious about their lives. And so, yeah, I was just, like, genuinely asking him regular questions that, his fans might not have asked. I don't know. It really got me thinking about fame, how wild fame can be. Like, how many people can idolize these individuals, and just the space between celebrities and fans and royalty and subjects, and the idea that this guy would perform at sold out, packed out stadiums of tens of thousands of people just dying to see him in person and get an autograph from him. And, like, I've never heard of him. And I just kind of had this, like, existential moment where I'm like, wow, like, how huge is this world? How dense is this world? How many people are in it that have their own devotions, their own lives? And, like, it just made me think of this song by Phil Elfram, of the Microphones, the universe conclusion at the end of this little EP he made. And he's just contemplating the stars, and he says, there are stars beyond those stars. There are hills beyond those hills. There are nights after this night. And the idea that, like, there is this sense of eternity and infinity to everything. And so, yeah, I mean, the size of it just really, really hit me. And it made me think of, why have this drive to touch or connect something that's more famous than ourselves? Why do we always want to be part of something bigger than ourselves? And I started to think about identity and mortality, and how when we identify ourselves with others, like celebrities or sports teams or communities, like the tea community even too, in a sense we kind of offload some of our own mortality into something that's less mortal. It sounds kind of weird, but, like, the more you identify with, like, the tea culture, the less you have this specific identity that, will die when you die, because the tea culture lives on. If you're a football fan, football existed before you were born. It will exist after you die, probably. And so if I identify myself with this sport, even when I die, a part of my identity survives. And so perhaps this is, like, a path to ego death, a quiet path to ego death, a kind of ego displacement almost. It reminded me of this book by Sasha Sokolov, A School for Fools, and he talks about how it's this passage that comes to mind. I'll paraphrase it. It's like, one does not disappear completely and entirely all at once. One is first transformed into something else, like an evening waltz in the garden or a flower. Only later does one disappear completely and entirely. And so, like, for me, I was thinking about this all day during shooting, and I'm like, okay, like, this guy is like, he's a vessel for people's mortality. He's like, in truth, an idol, a means for unknown people to transcend and touch something famous. But anyways, this really got me, juiced up for this feeling of Jingmai Mountain and this sense of like this otherworldly rituals, this idea of being apart from the world and within the world. And it was a really weird experience, but I really enjoyed it. And it all came around because I made a lot of short form content and somebody saw it and just offered me this gig, right? And delivered me right into the heart of Jingmai Mountain. And so that first day of filming, I just kind of followed them around, did my good duty. And then the second day, we finally got our free reins. And so, like, everybody left before we woke up. And so it was almost like it was just a dream of what had happened the day before. And we were right in the Jingmai Dajai. It's like that big village, that big Dai village in Jingmai. And we're trying to figure out how to get back to one of those smaller villages because we filmed some in the different villages, and I really liked Nolgan. Nolgan was just beautiful, and I wanted to go back and just see that. I was, again, with my fiance, so there was a little bit of tea and a little bit of sightseeing and whatnot. And so we actually found a bus stop in the Jingmai Dajai. I was really surprised. I didn't know there was a bus there. And we waited for about an hour or like half an hour, something like that. And then we're like, okay, like maybe the bus won't come. But fortunately, I had some context from the day before. Like when we're out like filming and everything, I was drinking tea with a lot of different people. And like, oh, like maybe if I like your tea, I'll come by. And so I liked one person's tea in Nolgan. And I messaged her again. And she was like, actually, my husband is in the Dapingjai and he'll come pick you up real quick. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And so we waited and then got a ride with, turns out to be Yan Xiang. Yan Xiang has a beautiful name. Yan is like rock or cliff, and Xiang is fragrance. And so it's like the fragrance of the cliff is his name. So yeah, it's really cool. He picked us up and drove us out to the Nolgan village. And as I mentioned earlier, Jingmai, it feels like sourcing on easy mode because all the villages are just right there and everyone's making tea. The main problem, though, that I would advise you to think about before you go is transportation. Like, if you don't have a car or a driver, it's really difficult to get around. Like I said, the bus is unreliable. It takes 3 hours to walk from one village to another. The roads aren't set up for, walking necessarily. And so you really do have to think about like how you're going to get around from village to village if you do. So we got back out to Nolgan and we're drinking tea with Yan Xiang and his wife, Eiling. And it was really nice. Like they had some really good tea. I kind of got into an argument with Eiling a little bit because she was like, oh, this is Gushu. And I'm like, really? It's like mid-March. How the heck do you have Gushu? And she's like, we got Gushu. It's real. And I kind of like was hesitant to believe it, but like asking around, I did find like, okay, like they are actually harvesting some of the older trees up here. We also had some weird sour tea. That needs to be investigated more. I know Alex is really interested in the sour tea, but it's this weird kind of like fermenting process that I couldn't quite grasp. And she didn't have any stuff that was being made, and so I would like to wait and see how it's made before I buy it. But anyways, like, it was really cool just being in that house and, like, seeing the wind come through, like, the people playing, the kids playing outside, the village structure and the community and stuff like that. And as I mentioned before, that's, like, heavy government assistance. And so the reason all of the architecture in that village was so precise is because they're not necessarily allowed to build or change any of the houses. Like, the government has to do it for them. Which is nice because you don't have to spend money on remodeling and building stuff, but you do have to you're at the whim of the municipality or the government. We did take a really nice walk through the village out into the gardens, into the forest kind of gardens area. And again, like the ecology up there is just beautiful. It's lush. It even began to rain out there for a little bit. And it was really cool because like this year in 2025, there was a decent amount of rain. In my opinion, a pretty good amount of rain. But it's funny because like the farmers be funny. Like they'll complain about everything, right? It was a drought the past 2 years, and they're like, oh, there's not enough rain. And then this year there's rain, they're like, oh, there's too much rain. It's just like you can never be happy. But yeah, no, it's really nice seeing just kind of their style of gushu. It's much more chill, much more calm. I think in Sichuanbana, a lot of the places I went to, you get that red earth, the sandy soil, not a lot of greenery. Here, everything felt like a tropical rainforest. It felt more like Yiwu than it would like Sichuanbana and like Bulong or the Monsong area. But it was really nice, like seeing this different type of garden. There was still, of course, like people making honey from wild bees. So they just hollow out a log, and then the bees would come and start building honey in there. So a lot of consistency throughout these villages. I remember one time, towards the end of the night, riding to their house where they sleep and they make the food. And it was like riding through the mountain with my fiance and Eiling, and it was like we're riding 3 deep on a motorcycle through this mountain as the sun was setting in like rural Yunnan. And I was like, man, this is the feeling of being alive. This is why I do all of this, because of this moment right here. And it was like a core memory forming. It was so cool. The next day, though, I had a really hard crash from a lack of sleep. Like, we got a ride from Nuogan to Wangji to see this other village. This is the Bulong village, as I mentioned. And, like, it was okay, but, like, man, I was so exhausted from, like, the full day of filming and then immediately going out and sourcing teas. And oh, man. And also, like, one thing that I know I talk about, and I complain with Paul a little bit sometimes, which is like, man, fresh raw pu'er is some of the hardest stuff on your stomach. It's so intense, it's so fresh, and even like the farmers, they say like, yeah, it's very shanghuo. Shanghuo is like, it's like too fresh. The energy is too much. It can like give you cold sores and give you diarrhea. Like it's really intense. And so my wife, or my fiance at the time, she woke up and she was like, I feel terrible. What happened? I think I'm sick. I'm like, I think it's just all of the raw pu'er tea we've been drinking. Like they just made it. I even like killed the green on a batch with Yanxiang, and like he gave that to me, and that was very, very sweet. But again, it's like sometimes in the mountains you just don't want to drink any more tea at some point. But Wangji was interesting because it's the Bulong village, and so it's very, very different. I remember waking up that day and hearing like this traditional song being played over a loudspeaker. I'm like, oh, it's like the morning prayer or something. And I go outside, and it's a trash truck playing this music. And it was just so funny because like, here's my perspective where like, oh, it's a beautiful traditional song, and it's like, oh, this is just the sound like, oh, bring out your trash up on the mountain. So we had a full rest day, but I went around to a few places in Wangji and tried their teas, but I did not like any of the teas in Wangji. I thought they were like, I found one that was decent, but everything I had in Nogan was significantly more to my palate. And so again, this is sourcing tea. Sometimes it's not about finding good versus bad tea when you're in a place like that where all of the tea is pretty good. It's more about finding what is to your taste. And so if you follow One River Tea, if you like our teas, if you buy our teas, you kind of can understand my taste, because I'm primarily the one sourcing a lot of these teas, especially in Yunnan. And so you kind of align yourself with a vendor that you like their taste in teas, and they will continually provide teas that they think is good. Because tasting tea, it's very, very subjective. But yeah, we spent a few more days up in Jingmai. I met up with Yanshang again, went out to the Dapingjiang, walked through that primordial garden, which is so, so cool. Highly recommend it. Really, really massive trees, and then below them, like the Gushu Gardens. And what was really cool about the Dapingjiang was the way that they had cows grazing through them, cows with like the bells just like sleeping amidst the tea trees. It was a really, really serene kind of vibe up there on the plateau. The soft tinkle of bells, the garden, people picking and selling tea leaves and stuff. But it is like significantly different from what I would see down in like a place like Yiwu, like in Guafengjai, the wild area of Guafengjai, versus like this very cultivated area where people have been growing these trees and living with these trees. There are footpaths, there are fences, there's a lot of like human interaction in with these trees. You're not hiking through the mountainous wilderness looking for ancient wild tea. It's a little different. And so we also went to another village because I've been to a few now and I want to see another Jingmai village, right? I was like, maybe I like the Jingmai area more than the Mongjing area. And so we went to Mengben, and there I just had one of the least exciting teas ever. It was very, very lackluster, even compared to like the Wangji stuff. And I was like, man, like it didn't really taste like anything. Even like the year-old stuff tasted like pretty meh. I'm very disappointed in that. But again, could be a lot of reasons. Could be the trees, the area, the processing. One thing that I didn't mention enough is the mishan that I had up here was so good. If you know me, I love Yunnan mishan. I ate it every single day, and it was one of the best parts of the trip. I did wake up early morning in Mongbong to see the cloud sea, because that area is really good for seeing the morning sunrise and seeing the clouds just form like an ocean. And so early in the morning, as I was flying my drone to get the views of the cloud ocean, I heard their trash truck coming along, and it wasn't singing a traditional song. Instead, it was singing a terrible version of "We Wish You a Merry Christmas" over and over and over, and it was like absolutely hilarious. I have a video about it. It just made me laugh so much. No doubt at some point I'll make a terrible short form reel to numb your brain about it. Anyways, thank you guys for listening to another episode of Tea Soup. If you are curious about that Nolgan tea, I pressed it into a tea cake in spring of 2025. Came out in June. It's the Illud Tempus, right? Based on this idea of being outside of time, that sense of sacred time, the ritual time. And so yeah, it's out there, it's available. I have a few more episodes I want to make before spring tea season kicks off again. I'm trying to make like at least a Tea Soup episode every month this year. Wish me luck. Encourage me and remind me if I forget. Next up on the list is Yiwu, and then after Yiwu I want to talk about Bada Mountain. So a few more interesting Pu'er episodes to hit you guys with. But until the next one, guys, this is Derek from Whenever Tea. Brew happy.